Hey everyone, welcome back for another deep dive. Today, we're going to be talking about something that I think is pretty relevant to, well, pretty much all of us, I think, especially nowadays. And that is this idea of toxic productivity. And we've got some really interesting source material today. We've got some podcast notes and an article excerpt. And we're going to use that to kind of unpack this whole concept of toxic productivity. You know, that feeling where you're working so hard, you're running around like a hamster on a wheel, but you're not actually getting anywhere. Yeah, well, that's kind of the heart of what toxic productivity is all about.
Yeah.
And we're going to see what our sources have to say about, how do we get here? Did the pandemic make it worse? What about AI? Is rest like a dirty word now?
Right.
And are women disproportionately affected by this? And like most importantly, can we actually break free from this cycle? So without further ado, let's just jump right in.
Yeah, I think it's a super important conversation to be having because, like you said,
Yeah.
it really does feel pervasive, this idea that we have to constantly be optimizing every single minute of the day. And almost like rest and downtime have become almost like these suspicious activities.
Yeah, it's like we're almost afraid to admit that we need to take a break. And our sources actually define toxic productivity
Yeah.
as this kind of like unhealthy compulsion to be productive at all times,
Yeah.
even at the expense of like our well-being, our relationships, the quality of our lives. And I feel like, the pandemic and then now this whole AI explosion, it's just amplified this pressure cooker, hasn't it?
Absolutely. I think the pandemic really blurred those lines between work and personal life.
Yeah.
And suddenly it became much more acceptable for work to bleed into all areas of our lives. And the expectation to be on all the time really skyrocketed. In fact, one of the sources we're looking at mentions that there was a 192% increase in weekly meetings post-pandemic.
192%.
Wow.
Yeah,
It's a crazy math.
that's meeting mayhem. That's not collaboration.
Yeah, exactly. It's not really leading to better teamwork or more productivity. It's just creating the sense of overwhelm and actually hindering deep focused work.
I mean, how can you possibly be productive when you're drowning in meetings all day long?
It's almost counterintuitive, right? We're
Yeah.
equating busyness with effectiveness, but they're really not the same thing at all.
It's so true. And then, you've got AI coming into the
Yeah.
picture, and supposedly it's here to like, free up our time and make us more productive.
Yeah.
But it also kind of raises this question of like, okay, but if AI is going to be doing all this stuff for us, then how do we even measure productivity anymore? Like, what does that even mean? And our source actually asked that very question. If AI is here to save us time in minutes and hours, how will we measure productivity?
It's a really good question, and I think it points to a need for a fundamental shift in how we think about productivity. If AI is going to be taking over these repetitive tasks, then our old metrics of hours worked,
Yeah.
they just become kind of irrelevant. We need to start focusing on outcomes, on the value that's being created, not just the time spent. And I think that's a really crucial distinction if we want to break free from this toxic productivity trap.
It makes you wonder, though, right? Like, with this obsession with being productive all the time, have we created this culture where rest is almost like a taboo subject?
Yeah.
It's like we're celebrating burnout and rewarding the people who push themselves to the limit.
I think there's definitely a hero culture at play where it's seen as a badge of honor to be exhausted and overworked. But the research shows that this is just not sustainable, and it's definitely not productive in the long run. One of our sources mentions that 62% of global workers feel like they don't have enough time off or breaks.
62%, that's a lot of people.
Yeah, it's a huge problem.
And the irony is that rest is actually what fuels productivity,
Right.
right? It's like trying to run a marathon without stopping.
Exactly.
You're going to collapse before you even reach the finish line.
You need those moments of recovery and rejuvenation to be able to perform at your best.
Absolutely. And what's interesting is that our sources actually point out that women specifically feel less comfortable taking vacation time than men do. Why do you think that is?
I think there are a lot of complex factors at play, but I think one of the big ones is that there's often this pressure on women to prove their dedication by always being available. It's tied into this idea of the second shift, where women disproportionately carry the burden of household tasks and childcare on top of their professional responsibilities.
It's like they're working two jobs, basically.
Yeah, exactly. And that takes a toll.
And our source actually mentions that mothers are 3 times more likely to handle most household tasks compared to fathers. It's kind of like they're set up to fail almost with these like impossible expectations. And you know what? This might actually be connected to another alarming trend that we're seeing, which is women leaving leadership positions at a higher rate.
It's a very real possibility that this constant pressure and lack of support is driving talented women away from leadership roles, and that's a loss for everyone.
Absolutely. And you know what? I think we need to talk about the role that leaders themselves play in this whole toxic productivity cycle
Hmm.
because they have such a huge influence on the culture of their organizations.
Yeah, absolutely. They set the tone in a lot of ways.
And that's something that we definitely need to unpack a little bit more. So let's dive into that in the next part of our deep dive. We'll see you there.
It really does start at the top, doesn't it? Like,
Yeah,
leaders kind of set the tone for the whole organization, whether they realize it or not.
right.
And unfortunately, a lot of leaders model those same unhealthy work habits. Like, they're
Mhm.
the ones sending those late night emails and bragging about how many hours they work and never taking breaks. So it creates this expectation that everyone else has to be on all the time, too.
Yeah, it's like this toxic productivity trickle-down effect. Like if the
Hmm.
boss is emailing at midnight, everyone else feels like they have to as well. But our sources also talk about some companies that are like pushing back against this, which is encouraging.
Yeah, absolutely. There are some companies doing some really cool things, like Shopify and Asana are mentioned in one of the articles. And they've taken some pretty drastic steps to combat this whole meeting overload thing. Like Shopify, for example, they did this Chaos Monkey initiative.
Yeah, Smokey.
Yeah, they basically canceled all recurring meetings that had more than 3 people. And they also instituted no meeting Wednesdays.
Wow,
And they ended up saving something like 322,000 hours.
that's incredible.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing what can happen when companies are willing to kind of shake things up and challenge the status quo.
That's for sure. But those are like pretty big company-wide changes, right?
Yeah.
So what about on a personal level? Like what can individuals do to like break free from this toxic productivity trap?
Well, I think it all starts with awareness.
Mhm.
Just recognizing that this always on mentality is not sustainable and it's actually harmful to our well being. And once you have that awareness, then you can start setting some boundaries. Like decide what your working hours are and stick to them. Turn off notifications outside of work hours. And most importantly, learn to say no.
Yeah, that can be hard.
It can be really hard, especially in today's world where we're all so connected all the time.
Right.
But it's essential if you want to protect your time and your energy.
So boundaries are key. What else?
Prioritize your tasks.
Ah.
Figure out what really matters and focus on those things. And learn to delegate or defer tasks that aren't urgent or essential. And don't be afraid to ask for help when you need it.
It's about working smarter, not harder.
Right,
Right.
exactly.
And it sounds like it's also about embracing the power of rest.
100%. Schedule regular breaks throughout your day, even if it's just for a few minutes to step away from your desk and clear your head. Take your vacation time and don't feel guilty about it. Rest is not a luxury. It's a necessity.
It's like fuel for the engine.
Exactly.
So it's not about like abandoning productivity altogether. It's about like reframing it and making it work for us instead of against us.
Right. It's about finding that balance where you can be successful in your work without sacrificing your health, your happiness, and your personal life.
Absolutely.
It's about being intentional with your time and your energy, focusing on what truly matters, and creating a work culture that supports well-being and sustainable productivity.
I love that. This has been such an eye-opening conversation.
Yeah.
And you know what? I think this is a perfect time to bring in that thought-provoking question that we mentioned earlier from our source material. They ask, what will your biggest regret in life be?
Mhm.
Like, do you really think it's going to be those missed deadlines or that extra project you didn't take on?
I really doubt it. I think our regrets are much more likely to be about the moments we missed, the connections we didn't nurture, the experiences we let pass us by because we were too caught up in this relentless pursuit of productivity.
That's such a powerful reminder to prioritize what truly matters in life. But what I'm really curious about is how do we break free from this toxic cycle on like a societal level? It just seems so deeply ingrained in our culture.
Yeah, it's a big question.
Yeah, it feels like we're kind of at this crossroads where toxic productivity is so ingrained in everything. But how do we change that? How do we shift those societal expectations?
Well, I think a lot of it starts with conversations like the one we're having right now, just raising awareness about the problem and
Yeah.
challenging that whole glorification of overwork and really promoting a more balanced and humane approach to work and life.
So it's about changing the narrative almost, like moving away from celebrating busyness and burnout, and instead recognizing that rest and well-being and personal time Those aren't like indulgences. Those are necessities.
Exactly. We need to redefine what success actually means. It's not about how many hours you work or how much you sacrifice. It's about living a fulfilling life, both personally and professionally.
It's about finding that sweet spot where you can contribute meaningfully to your work,
Yeah.
but without, burning yourself out and
You there.
damaging your health and your relationship.
Right. It's about creating a culture where it's okay to set boundaries. It's okay to disconnect after work hours. It's okay to take vacation without feeling guilty.
And that change needs to happen at all levels, right? Like from individuals to companies to like society as a whole.
I agree. Individuals need to prioritize their well-being and advocate for those healthier work practices. Companies need to create environments that value their employees' well-being. And as a society, we need to challenge that deeply ingrained belief that our worth is somehow tied to our productivity.
This is a big task.
Yeah.
But it's not impossible.
Yeah.
We were just talking about the companies like Shopify and Asana. They're proving that it can be done.
Yeah, they're great examples. They show that it's not an either situation. You can have a successful business and a healthy and engaged workforce. It's just about making conscious choices and setting priorities and designing systems that support a more balanced and sustainable way of working.
It's about working smarter, not harder. And remembering that life is about more than just, checking things off a to-do list.
Right. It's about those moments of joy and connection
Definitely
and
being.
making a positive impact on the world.
Exactly.
And those are the things that often get pushed aside when we're caught up in that toxic productivity cycle.
So this deep dive has really been about reclaiming our time in our lives in a way. It's about recognizing that we have a choice. We can choose to continue down that path of burnout and overwhelm, or we can choose to create a different future.
A future where well-being and balance and purpose are at the forefront.
I love that. So let's choose wisely. Let's step off that hamster wheel and start building a world where we can all thrive. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive, everyone. We hope it's given you some things to think about and maybe even inspired you to make some changes in your own life.
And remember, you're not alone in this. We're all figuring it out together.
That's right. And it's okay to rest. In fact, it's essential.
So go ahead, take a break, recharge, and come back to your work and your life with renewed energy and purpose. You deserve it.